Hey, welcome everyone. Looks like recording started automatically when I started the webinar. Welcome to everybody joining us. This is AIA's Materials Matter, integrating materials into sustainability action plans with some of our materials pledge working group members, as well as signatories of the materials pledge, talking about how they've integrated their materials planning into their firms and their firms' sustainability action plans in particular. I am Melanie DeCola. I am the director of AIA's Climate Pledge Program. So that includes the 2030 commitment as well as the materials pledge, and was integral in helping to put together some of these documents. And I'm going to turn it directly over to Misha, who's going to be your sort of MC for today's show.
All right. Thank you so much, Melanie. And great to be chatting with all 73 of you about this really important part of being part of the Materials Pledge. So let's get right into it. So a little bit about each of us. We'll just quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Misha. I, until recently, was in practice working at a firm where I was helping develop a sustainability action plan. Now I'm actually working for Yale University as the Associate University Architect for Sustainability. Christine,
Hi
introduce yourself.
everyone, can you hear me? So my name is Christine Boringer. I work at Perkins Eastman Architects as a firm-wide specialist, but also as a materials liaison for the firm. Also a member of the 23rd Committee for the AA, but today I'm here in other role.
And hi, everybody. I am Jennifer Whaling, Director of Sustainability with HMC Architects.
So you'll get to hear from Christine and Jennifer a lot more about how your firm specifically are addressing sustainability action around materials. But to start with, there are required AA learning objectives. I won't read through them, but you're getting credit for being part of this webinar today. Okay, so a little bit of background on the AA Materials Pledge. Hopefully you all are already here because you're a signatory. If you're not a signatory, please go over to the IA website. You can use this QR code and learn more about the Materials Pledge and why it's so important. It's exciting. We've had a lot of growth in signatories for the last few years since the pledge began in 2018. And when the pledge was first started, the landscape around material selection and optimization was still very nascent, and categories for how you define successful transparency, successful optimization were only beginning to be defined. We're very lucky that here in 2025, we actually have a much clearer industry-wide framework for what good material selection actually means, which means that the lift to become a signatory and participate has become much smaller. Any firm, of whether you're a small firm or an enormous firm, can really make these commitments and actually implement them, which is why I think it's very timely to talk about how you might plan that, and that's what we'll focus on today. So you've probably seen this common materials framework somewhere recently. It's really everywhere now. Any database that you might be using to look at material selection, you'll probably start seeing these logos. This is a fairly recent thing, and many of the people who are helping develop this were also involved in creating the Materials Pledge. And so early on, the Materials Pledge focused on, sorry, this is moving forward. I don't know why. Okay. Focused on these 5 impact areas: human health, climate health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and circular economy. And so in the last 2 years that we've had reporting, I'm sorry, I don't know why this is moving on me. Okay. Turned off remote control. Hopefully it'll stop advancing. So if you take these and unpack them a little bit more, the common materials framework defined through the wonderful mindful materials working groups has really helped you organize what it actually means to have transparency, assessment, commitment, and optimization within each of these. So for example, under human health, you might have labels or programs that just give you transparency to whether something contains, I'm so sorry, this keeps moving forward on me. I don't know why.
Misha, I think the PowerPoint might have an auto advance on.
Okay.
Fortunately, that might be an issue.
Display settings. Sorry about that, guy. Let me just exit this and try this one more time. Apologies. I guess I just keep hitting the backward button too, but
Yeah, that's the other option.
all right, let's hope that that stays unmoving. Okay, so as I was saying, what's really exciting is now that we have this framework, and I absolutely encourage everybody on this call who's interested in diving deeper to go onto the, nope, still doing it, onto the Mindful Material website and look at the list of documentation of the Common Materials Framework. Because if you're curious about what it means to achieve success in selecting your product for climate health or for ecosystem health, this really gives you a framework for that. And what's also really exciting is that all the databases that your firm already might be using look at products, whether that's Soulmind's Transparency Catalog, Eco Meetings, where the Mindful Materials Catalog now lives, Materially Better, which has Red to Green, ASLAB, Building Ease. All of these are working on implementing that Common Materials Framework into their search tools, into the way that products are selected and optimized. I feel like I'm doing a Pecha Kucha where you can't stop the slides. Okay. And so you have all these tools that you might already be using, you might be interested in using as a firm, that are already aligned with the way the materials pledge is working. And the last thing I wanted to say about the materials pledge as a whole is that it leverages the power of firms, be they large or small, to really send a signal to industry. And so this is an example of our report from 2023, our first year of really collecting project level data. And this shows you just the products that people reported the most in these various impact categories. And so even just seeing this as a picture of the industry firms that were signatories is really helped us because we can say, go back to the manufacturers and say, look, you guys are really achieving on human health. Or we can find areas where architects are specifying a lot on something like, let's say, tiling, but why aren't people finding more transparency and optimization for those categories? And again, even if you feel like your power as a specifier is limited, imagine if we can combine this and send a huge market signal and say, hey, the entire materials industry needs to adapt because we as AIA members believe this is really important. We have to address these 5 impact categories. So that's a little bit high level framing. And now we'll get into what a materials action plan actually is and how it works. So hopefully most people on this call already have a sustainability action plan. Of course, the requirement for being a 2030 signatory. And technically, we've always said, you know, a firm that joins materials pledge should have a materials action plan. Until now, we haven't really defined concretely what that means. Now we have a guide, which I really encourage you to check out on the AIA website as a PDF. And so these following slides are really taken out of that guide. I'm going to walk you through the various components. And they're based on the Sustainability Action Plan guide that AIA created some years ago, which has a certain structure that we're suggesting you can just add on to. So if you already have a sustainability action plan, chances are it fits the AIA structure and you're able to fit these material sections in very smoothly. So what I always love to say about these materials action plans is that they're an opportunity for you to look both inward and outward. So inward, you're looking at your firm and you're giving yourself, your sustainability team, everybody in the office, a clear understanding of what's important about materials, what's going to be tracked, when, and how. So it's a really important roadmap internally, but it's also a really important external signal. And I'm so sorry about these slides that keep advancing. I'm not sure what the best solution to this is.
Someone left it in the chat, I think.
Thank
You have
you.
to go to transitions and then you can activate instead of timing, like by clicking
Okay, let me try that. Under slideshow.
transitions to the right. No, always use subtitles there. Go
Advanced.
mouse click.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
There.
Thank you to
Well done.
Catherine. Thank you so much. I apologize if I was a bit discombobulated in trying to try to deal with the click backward. Everybody sees my screen now? We're good? Okay.
You might have to
And
do it for all slides though, Misha. That's only.
oh, okay. Let me do this now before we keep going. I'm going to select all the slides. advanced slide on mouse click. Okay.
Yep.
Amazing. Okay. All right. Thank you everybody for bearing with me. I think we're gonna be a lot slower right here. All right, great. So as I was saying, your materials action plan is looking both inward and outward. And I think this outward piece is really, really important because you're going to use your materials action plan to talk to product reps when they come and bring a product in and you say, hey, we actually have a list of criteria. We actually have decided what a good product is. Do you fit that or not? You're going to use this when you talk to potential clients and say, hey, we have an action plan. We can really help your institution or you homeowner, choose the healthiest products that you possibly can. And so you really position yourself as part of this larger materials pledge community. So the first part, again, aligning with the sustainability action plan framework is putting a commitment. And so you figure out where your participation in materials pledge align with your larger mission and philosophy. So how does this reflect your firm's ethos? This is going to be different, of course, for each firm, depending on the kinds of clients that you have and the kinds of projects that you do. But a chance for you to reflect too on, as you pitch yourself to a potential client, how might your participation in the materials pledge really fit into that? And you'll see the way that this is structured both in this presentation and in the PDF is that we have kind of a where to begin set of ideas, sort of if you're just starting out. And then within that, each category, you also have an advancing forward set of suggestions. So if you feel like that's something you've already accomplished, then here are suggestions for how you might go beyond. So within your action plan, for example, oh no, it's still advancing. Okay. Summarize what your firm has accomplished and give a real call to action to your whole company. All right. The second section is really thinking about your design process. So review your whole design process. And if you haven't already documented it, which you probably have as part of your sustainability action plan, try and map out at what stages do you really make those material selections? At which stages do you start writing the specs? At what stages do you have an opportunity for the whole design team to ask questions about the optimization of materials? And how do you record those decisions? So think about where within that timeline you might be able to create some time and space for setting goals, checking them, or improving them. And if that's something you've already done, then think about expanding those additional practices. Find a project or two that was successful. Perhaps if you already reported to the materials pledge, finding one that had a particularly large number of transparency or optimization-oriented materials, and try and learn from those and find what specific milestones or points within that project process those decisions were made, and how can you replicate that in all of your projects. The next section is really about setting goals and how to evaluate them. And so while this is easy, for better or for worse, as the 2030 challenge, right, where you just say, we have a certain percent reduction from EUI, and that is our main target. There are all these different ways that you can track, am I getting the right materials for human health, for climate health? But we're starting to be able to track those. And I think you'll see both Jen and Christine are going to show you some really incredible ways that data has been tracked and visualized at their firms. And so this is your opportunity to set some goals, and they could be as simple as I want to double the amount of product in the next 5 years that have declarations, transparency or declare labels. They might be as specific as saying, I want this embodied carbon reduction in all of my flooring. And so you really want to think about sort of firm level, what kinds of materials are you specifying in general, both in a digital materials library as well as your physical material library? What standards do you have for that? At the project level, how are you going to track those goals and what are they? How do you set them together with the client? And at the product level, really being able to track each product that you specify and find its characteristics. And then going beyond that and expanding, thinking about increasing the number of product types or projects that you're tracking, if that's something you're already doing. So let's say you already submitted to the materials pledge report last year. How might you expand the number of projects that are doing that, or number of materials that you're able to report? How might you collect transparency data and actually start to analyze that? And again, that's something that Jen and Kristen are going to show you examples of. So just an example of what some firms have done in this area. This is, again, 2 examples from that document that you can find on the AA website. This is Space Smith, and you can see that they've made clear material-specific goals that support each of the 5 materials pledge impact categories. So, here on the right, their targets, they've set very specific, ideas for embodied carbon, and recycled materials. And similarly, Ewing Cole, I think, did a great job of breaking apart these goals in a timeline. So we know that some of these goals are going to be easy to achieve in the short term, and some of them are going to take much longer. And so in each of the impact categories, they've really tried to outline what can they do in the next few years. And this plan was from 2023, so now a couple years old. And what are they trying to get to, sort of regenerative design in a much longer time frame. The next section is about governance and reporting. And this is how are you going to collect this data? So, you've figured out how this fits into your firm's larger ethos. You've figured out sort of what goals you want to set, and they might be as specific as the number of EPDs you're getting, or as sort of more holistic as everything should be below the baseline for embodied carbon. But then how do you make sure that your projects are actually doing this? So, if it's a small firm, it might be enough to have one or two people who are sort of the product experts and they track this. If it's a large firm, you probably want to figure out a structure. So there's a point person for every project or every project type who's collecting this data and reporting it. And you're going to see some examples of how that data is tracked, whether that's an Excel sheet, whether it's an online database, whether it's integrated into BIM and Revit, whichever software you use. But this is really where you start to think about that. And then what does accountability look like? And what does timeline throughout the year look like? So we're hoping to eventually align 2030 reporting and materials pledge reporting in the spring. Now they're somewhat staggered. And so that means there's a timeline where you collect the data throughout the year, and then you have a few months in the new year to sort of put it all together and report it to the AIA. So how does your firm's own schedule of projects fit together with that? And then thinking, advancing beyond that, how might you develop your tools or capitalize on existing tools? I've mentioned already a few like ACE-Lab, Building Ease, Single Minds Project Builder, or spreadsheets, including the spreadsheet that we provide as a template for pledge reporting. How might you build on those tools to create something that's really works with your firm's workflows? Then education. So it's great to sign the pledge. It's great to have maybe a couple of material experts in your office who really know what they're doing, who can train people about what the right way to select materials is. But if not everybody has at least some basic understanding what the 5 impact categories are, why your firm's participation in the pledge is important, how it aligns with the firm's mission, it's not going to be as successful. So one of the most important things you can do, if you haven't done it already, and we'll show an example of this later on, is to have a workshop or presentation about the materials pledge. Introduce it to everybody, no matter what the role is in a project, because everybody's going to touch materials in some way. And introduce other resources like the Carbon Materials Framework, the Red List, EC3, and some of these other databases that I mentioned. And if that's something that you've already done, think about how you might deepen materials knowledge further. And that may be again to the whole office, or you might develop a core group of materials experts and really give them all of the resources that you can about good materials selection. And think too about how you're going to debrief your success every year to your firm. A lot of firms, of course, are reporting to the 2030 challenge and do materials pledge, but are they bringing that data back to your teams so everybody understands sort of where they are in relation to the data that's being reported and how they're plugging into that larger picture? And then outward facing. Again, what is your strategy for outreach, advocacy, and knowledge sharing beyond your own firm? And of course, a big part of this is educating our clients who might have some ambitions around materials, but not necessarily know all the details that we know in materials pledge signatories. So think about in your RFP responses, in your presentations to clients, how are you going to speak about these commitments to the materials pledge? How are you going to articulate them, and how are you going to get them on board so that they really understand why this is important to you, and how this will affect their health, the building occupants, and any burdens on the future? And then beyond that, and consider advocating not just with your clients, but on the local or national level, and AIA provides many opportunities to do that as well. And finally, this last piece may not seem as immediately relevant to projects and client work. I think it's really, really important. And it's really about walking the talk. We as firms make all these commitments to having the right materials in our clients' projects. Sometimes we forget that it's also really important that our own offices and our own operations live up to those standards as well. So this is an opportunity, again, as part of your sustainability action plan and the embedded materials action plan, to think about what your office supplies are like, where you get furniture. Do you encourage circularity in all of things that you find in your office? And you might be a small firm where that's easy to track. You might be an enormous firm that has a lot of contracts, and you want to start scrutinizing those and saying, well, how are we cleaning our office? What policies do we have around equipment? And do they actually align with the same goals that we're putting into all of our projects? You know, many offices, of course, have an amazing job of this. And part of what happens then is that your office becomes a living demonstration when your clients do come into what is possible in their projects. Oh, wow, I didn't know you could make, have this recycled glass counter. I kind of think that I now see how that could be possible in my circumstance. And I guess there are further opportunities that I won't go into in more detail now for the sake of time. And then what you also find, and I'm not going to read through these, I just want everybody on this call to understand the wealth of resources that are in this PDF that we've developed in the Material Pledge Working Group. For each of these areas, developed a few beginner questions, advanced questions, and then lists of both programs and certifications and additional resources that are all linked to websites. So I encourage you to check these out. For human health, resources for how you might ask or look for transparency or disclosure information, questions that you might ask both of your project teams and manufacturers, and that we have those resources for climate health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and circular economy. So I encourage you to take a look at those. But now I'm really excited to pass this over to Christine, who is going to show you how all of these ideas and frameworks of the Materials Action Plan can really get implemented at a firm.
Okay. Do I have the control or do I need to request again? I think I'm fine, right?
You do. Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Misha. Well, hello again. So we're gonna talk a little bit of what's Perkins Eastman doing these days regarding materials. Let's see. Come on, you can do it. There you go. Not that much. So Perkins Eastman is a firm that has more or less 1,000 people, 1,000 employees. We have almost, I think, 20 practice areas. And for some time, materials has been something that we have really tried to focus. As a part of that, I think we try to make it at every level. It's embedded in our practice areas. And we also try to make it a point to be part of our sustainable ecosystem. That's why we're part of the Mindful Materials Forum, for example. And we have been reporting for the AIA Materials Pledge since it was possible, which was last year. And let's see. Okay. So clearly, as a part of all these people that we work with, we noticed at some point that clearly when we talk about materials, as you all might know, it's not about one solution fits all in general. So thinking of that, we have tried to keep the conversation going for some time already with our different locations, basically asking what is material health for you. And I think that has laid the ground for what I'm going to show you later on, and also for several resources like the one in there, like that material request form that probably many of your firm has. But I think it has been a basic and important part of all our work. And I think that this year is particularly relevant. This year, Perkins Eastman is going to put out there what we're calling our sustainable materials vision, which should be not only a market sign in terms of what we actually consider a healthy material for us, what we work with, but also a different message for our employees in all levels, saying what we consider good design through materials, basically, and through basic stuff. For example, that a good material is simple in a sense that you don't need to look a lot into like overcomplicated. It's intentional. You probably don't need to look at a lot of variances from it. If it's a good material, it's going to be enough. It's informed. You know what it's in it. And of course, you think of it with designing with time in mind, in a sense that we know that it's going to be forever. It has an impact on the environment. So you probably think about it. So, Okay. Okay, has his mind of its own, apparently. So, okay, we have been talking about this for this year especially, and I think that as a part of that, we think that everything starts with, of course, education and awareness to come through transparency, which is a super relevant part, of course, related to material, to actually at the end be able to implement this in projects. As a part of that, we also think that it's relevant to implement it in different outreaches. So we look to have it embedded into culture, into our design process, of course, into the education itself of our employees, but of course also related to advocacy. And related to that, I'm going to show you a little bit what are we thinking regarding our materials action plan. So I think that the main part, which is something that we have noticed like for some time already regarding our materials action plan, lies in the base. And by that, I mean the fundamental part of our base is the education. The education of our materials action plan goes around transparency, related to dialogues, to a specific playbook that we provide, and also, of course, related to disclosure and to optimization. And that's what ultimately gives people, once educated and with enough knowledge, the power to go, of course, into better and into best, which is what we're aiming at the end, right? But thinking of that, what we're working with these days is a materials action plan that is based on these 3 different levels. So, and also, of course, works with the 5 material buckets that Mindful Materials was able to put together, and also the AA pledge uses. 2 of these buckets are going to be mandatory in a certain level. But if you were to ask me, I think the one that we consider fundamental these days is our base level. The base level is the one that acts as the level of entrance for a lot of people in our firm, that brings the correct conversation, and that brings the educational level at the end. Of course, the next levels are relevant. All of them bring transparency conversations and optimization conversations to the table. But is the base level the most relevant one, and the one that I'm gonna do some double clicking today. So a bit overwhelming. I'm not gonna stop at this very long, but just so you have an idea, this is our materials action plan table, what we call. So this table is aimed to act more than anything else, more than a request. Is meant to act as a roadmap, if you want to call it. So it aligns with the materials pledge. As you might see, it aligns with our 3 levels, and it looks to provide more than anything else options to our peoples. You're going to see that in orange, it's everything that is mandatory, which is pretty basic, if you want to call it. It's going to evolve with the years, but you need to start somewhere. And with time, we're going to go after what's next once people get affiliated and they learn more, of course. You can do it. Come on. No, you can't. Oh, yes, you can. So if we were to think of this like on an organizational level, I would say that this is sort of a spiral in a sense that we have base, of course, where we have all our education, we have people getting familiar with all this alphabet soup and acronyms that material health sometimes is, right? Then intrinsically, this brings you into better in a sense that you know the meaning of things. You are able to measure yourself against your metrics and against everyone else, which intrinsically is going to bring you into better, meaning you're embedding into this ecosystem that a healthy material is. You're going to understand what everything means. And I think that the relevance of all this is that every research that we do into a healthy materials is going to feed into the next project. It's going to feed, and it's going to come from our previous research. So no research is lost. Research in healthy materials is a huge amount of time. So provide the sense to our people, to our PMs, everyone, that this is not lost time. I think it's a fundamental aspect of it. So if I were to like show you just a little bit of it, I would say that one of the important part is, of course, that a part is mandatory, is related to transparency. And of course, the rest is more encouraged than anything else, and it acts as a path. Part of it is conversational, what I call it, meaning it provides the correct questions and the correct prompts for people to go after better decisions. All of it is taken, by the way, from the Materials Action Plan document from the AAA. So fundamental to take your decisions from there. So you have your playbook to get some ideas. You can double click into that. I'm not gonna do it now because we don't have that amount of time. And of course, you can get enough questions to see how do we implement this? Because of course, with materials, sometimes it's very easy to fall into the abstract side of things, and it's very hard to implement. How do we bring this into the different phases of our projects? How do we bring it into a client, for example? How do we measure ourselves? And of course, then it's the concrete component related to transparency. How many EPDs are we looking at this level? How much are we asking? And I think one key aspect in a firm of this size is what we call the easy buttons. So the easy buttons in this case is what we call our like Chase 4, D4, Connect 4, I think was the game. Sorry, very Latin American of me, don't know the name of this game. But what we're trying to do in here is to provide a more graphical friendly way for people actually to look into this and to understand better, provide just the correct amount of information. This is being done, so it's going to be ready in a couple of months, and hopefully it's much friendlier than our huge map that is also going to be available. But let's see. We go to the next one. Yes, what about carbon? So, well, carbon, of course, plays a role inside this without, of course, going into a very tunnel vision. Oops, thanks. We also join into this what we call a carbon action plan. It has several parts. This is one of the most relevant areas where we have this pyramid, also divided in levels, where graphically we're showing our people the impact of their decisions in these bubbles, right? So they're able to see what does entitles, for example, to go for a certain amount of window to our ratio, what does entitles to have less or more quantities, how much that of materials, how much that affects our carbon impact. So basically, this is going to be joined to our materials action plan. It's going to be connected. So people are going to be requested to take decisions based on this. So for example, take 2 bubbles from good, or at the enhanced level, take 1 best, etc. And slowly start getting familiar with this carbon plan. So we can go to the next. Yes. So of course, as I was telling you before, we think that this should act as a whole plan. It's not a one resource kind of thing. So this is accompanied by several initiatives. We're working on libraries. We're working on playlists in our specs. So our libraries specifically, you would be surprised, but we have no standard whatsoever up to this day. Why? Because it's very hard to align all of our different libraries and locations. So we're making it one step at a time. We are working with a steering committee where we're starting with setting up standards. We're also working on a digital character of this library through a couple tools that you can see in there, which what we're doing with them is creating playlists for people to relate to these asks that we're doing. If we're asking something, hopefully we're able to reinforce this through resources, so they're able to go in here and actually see what they can find, see what they can use that is actually has been created for them. Same with specs. Specs had been cleaned up. This was an effort, like a long effort, and has been divided in 3 different levels. And it's a sort of what we call a grab and go resource. This is a guarantee. You get your specs, you just use them, and this is going to reinforce everything that we have been asking you in in all other parts of our materials action plan. And finally, well, we're trying to also, now that we're saying all this, measure ourselves, because of course you can say a lot, but one thing is saying, one thing is measuring. So I think the main way of measuring yourself when you're talking about materials, of course, reporting for the AA pledge. And we're trying to make a thing out of this in a sense that we're trying to enhance the system that we have to report. These numbers that you see here might seem like not a lot, but to report one project is really like a ton of work. So we're really proud that we are actually double our output this year. We involve different practice areas into this effort, and also locations, and people are reporting between 1 or 3 materials, which is a ton. And I think one cool guarantee that you get from this is that we have been able to take this data, take the spreadsheet that you used to report, and take it back for us. What do we do with this? We work with a basic dashboard in Power BI, and we're tracking our information and our reporting data. So we're seeing what are we doing, and who's doing not better, but who's doing what maybe, who needs more support, which is a huge deal. And we're trying to translate this into a very graphical system so people can see like what's going on. Like, what does it mean that I'm supporting, for example, a human health bucket? What are the divisions in my spec that are like very strong these days where I need to work further? So yeah, it's a whole effort. And with that, I think I'll give it to Jennifer. Yes.
Misha, I think it's you, right? Still?
Yes, I have a little
Again? There we go.
interlude here. And I'm putting in this interlude for the firm that I previously worked for when I was working on sustainability and materials action coordination, partially because I also wanted to share what this might look like at a much smaller firm. So Centerbrook Architects, to give everyone an idea, we're in a small town or in the Connecticut River Valley. It's around 50 people, so much smaller firm, one location, and most of the projects in the New England region. And our participation in the materials pledge was really started out with a big office-wide event, which was a materials competition. And the way that we ran this was, it's advancing on its own again. Okay. Apparently all my slides have this. And the way we ran this was we assigned every single person, every designer in the office to a category of materials, loose based on the materials pledge reporting, which you actually see here on this pinup board, concrete masonry, insulation, flooring, walls, and ceilings, and wood and oak. And so each of those teams spent several months researching what good, better, and best products were in their categories, and then presenting all of the things they found to the office in a series of office-wide presentations. Which culminated in a big competition whose winners you can see here, where the office actually vote on their favorite healthy and sustainable products. And we put those products up on this wall where everybody was able to see them, and then created a series of model specifications for all of our project managers to build into their projects that are, again, based on the products that are identified here. And then how does this get implemented in, again, in a small firm that still standardizes a lot of things on BIM? We decided that rather than trying to pursue a lot of different spreadsheets or databases, the easiest way to start telling this was to use Revit, because that's where everything already lived. And so working together with the BIM group, we developed this sustainability sheet that tracks a lot more than materials, but I'm just going to show you sort of the materials component of it, which for anybody who's worked in Revit before, it's basically a materials tag. So this is already what the firm was using in order to schedule materials on plans. And so basically now you could go into the type properties of any of the materials on your finished plan and assign additional environmental data to it. So all of this whole spreadsheet was basically generated through that interface. And the idea here was to provide a really quick visual guide to people as they were selecting materials, putting them into their submissions of which categories their products are hitting or weren't. And we found that actually during construction administration, this as part of the document set became very useful, because if substitutions were proposed, project managers would go back to this and very quickly visually verify sort of what aspects materials hit and which one they didn't. And so if your team uses BIM for every project and this is a useful workflow, this is one way that you can do it. And then we use this directly for materials pledge reporting. And so with that quick interlude, now I'll pass it on to Jennifer.
Thank you, Misha. So At HMC, we are, just to give you a little bit of background on, advance for me, please. We're all having our own issues with slides, aren't we? Here we go. We are 7 offices up and down the West Coast. Thanks to a recent partnership with Bassetti Architects, we now have offices in Seattle and Portland as well. We're about 400 employee owners, and we work in 4 major markets: pre-K-12, higher education, healthcare, and community and culture. We recently reissued our sustainability action plan. Full transparency, we don't have a materials action plan yet, but part of the reason to update our sustainability action plan was to include the AI materials pledge specifically. So you can look at our website and on the DDX for a full copy of our sustainability action plan. But it went a lot deeper than our old one. It went into kind of 3 areas: who we are, what we do, and how we engage. But really today, what I want to focus in here is on this AIA material pledge component of our sustainability action plan. And really, as we looked into what does this mean to us, the understanding that the power that we have in the materials we specify is so huge as designers, and that these materials have both human and environmental impacts. And we want to make sure that we're thoughtful and intentional with those selections. We set up some short-term goals and some long-term goals. And if you look to the process for creating a material action plan, a lot of this is in line. We just haven't brought it out as its own separate component yet. So for short-term goals, we actually started our AI material pledge tracking with our interior finishes, and I'll explain a little bit why in some of the slides coming up. And one of our goals was that all of our interior products would meet at least 1 material pledge category. And with the idea that then we would soon move into what's going on in our master specification, things like drywall and insulation. Those are on every single project. A lot of people don't necessarily, as long as they're performing, don't necessarily care what products those are. So what kind of a difference could we make there? And next we'll be going into our exterior materials. And then looking out at long-term goals for 2030, that the idea that all of our products that we're specifying would meet at least 1 pledge category, and defining some of these was a little bit kind of a throw in the dark, not knowing how easy or nor hard it would be to meet these yet. For example, with this next one, the idea that all interior finishes would meet human health criteria, that's something we put out there for 2030. After 2 years of reporting, I can say, I think we'll be at least 99% of our products meeting human health by next year. That's a really big goal for us. A little bit further out, and kind of a reach goal, the idea that our red list would be eliminated from our specifications. Today, I think we all know what a challenge this is, and is it even kind of realistic in the next 5 years? I think the more that we're pushing for this, the more potential that it has to be there. From there, for our teams, we kind of broke things down even a little bit more, what resources need to be really involved in considering this. The team members, timing, the idea that the material pledge is due once a year, but then we want to be working with project teams at least through 2 check-ins through their design process on materials, that at 50% DDs, after they've kind of made their first round of selections, we want to take a look and see what kind of improvements we can make in terms of how we're meeting the material pledge categories. And then again at 90% CDs. And then from a project cost standpoint, that really the expectation is that you're not increasing material costs at all, but you do include time for our sustainability team to work with the project team. And then in terms of how much we're reporting for this year, our report for our 2024 reporting year, our goal was to get at least 75% of our projects that reached 100% CDs, and next year we're up at 90%, giving some leeway for either those projects that were well into design already before we started our process, or in our new partnership with the Pacific Northwest, getting them kind of on board with our new process. And then as we move forward, one of the things we did first was kind of this outward look rather than an inward look, and starting what we called a building materials intake form. This went out to all of our product reps and said, we're creating an internal database and we need better information on you guys. One, we need a place where everyone can go for your contact information. But we also want to know, are you familiar with the AI material pledge? Are you familiar with the common materials framework? What are some of the certifications and documentation related to sustainability that you have on your products? And who's the best person to talk to in your organization about sustainability? So when I get down into the nitty gritty and I need a question answered about sustainability, about documentation, I have someone to go to that speaks my language. And this database has been a huge help for our teams. So next was going into changing the way that we do our interior finish schedule. I mentioned that we started with interior materials, and we were creating our process before there was guidance from the AIA. And we knew we had an internal issue that our finish schedules were different from office to office. So part of this was, let's get that consistency across all of our offices. This is in Excel. This loads right in as stickies into Revit. And with that, there's the piece that everybody sees that goes on the drawings. That's that top part. And then that bottom part was our expectation of our designers to start reporting on categories. And the feedback we got, this is one of our earliest versions, was, this is all great, but I don't know what it means to meet human health. So kind of Christine was alluding to the easy button. This one looks a little bit more complicated, but it's actually quite a bit easier for them. We kind of identified what are some of the certifications and documentation around sustainability that they see often. And we've made that easy for them. My team will come in and do kind of a second QA/QC and add in additional information there. And then from there, working with our digital practice team, who's really kind of the wizards of creating data for us, taking this into Power BI, then we can really start to visualize what this looks like. When we're looking at all of our projects or even an individual project, we can also look at this by practice, by office, by designer. We can start to say, you know, who's doing well, who maybe, like Christine mentioned, needs more support. But the idea in our second year of reporting just this year, that 93% of our products met at least one category. We collected data on 458 products altogether. When we look at those products in a little bit more detail, we can see that 416 of those met human health, only 72 of them met social health and equity. We know that that is kind of the hardest one to meet. But we can also see here that 30 of those materials didn't meet any categories, and that's something that we really want to dig into. From this, we have the ability to kind of sort this information in a number of different ways and use that to really help our teams moving forward. One of the things we did this year was picked out all of the products that met 4 and 5 categories and shared this with our team. Along with this is a whole Excel sheet of what these products actually are. So these are products we have specified in the past. We know that they meet 4 and 5 categories. If you need a carpet tile or a ceiling tile or resilient flooring, whatever it is, here's a list of products you can start with that we've already done the research on. Not to say that they couldn't go through any other product and we could do the same research, but at least it's a starting point for them. And I think even honestly, for me, more interesting is these 30 products that didn't meet any categories. We're doing a few things here. One is we're getting to our time in reporting. Did we just run out of time? Were we not able to dig deep enough to find the information? In some cases, we've gone back and we have found that some of these do meet at least one categories. In other cases, I'm going into that database and I'm calling those sustainability people and saying, hey, do you really not have any information? Or if you do, why isn't it more accessible? And we've gotten a little bit more. And if they just don't have the information, then that's a whole different conversation. What are your plans moving forward? Do you plan to do these tests? Do you plan to get these certifications? If yes, great. If no, we're moving on. And I'm not sure what's going on in the world of toilet partitions, that hardly any of our toilet partitions last year met any of the categories, but that's something that we're looking at this year. Where we can't find that information, encourage those manufacturers to come along. We are not afraid to kind of leave them behind and find those new products that will meet more categories. So from there, we can also look at a project level detail. We reported on 13 projects this last year. We had 3 of them that were at least all of their products met at least one category, and across the board, I think our projects did pretty well. Look at the detail in one particular project, and this is probably at about 100% CDs. We also typically will meet with projects at 50% DDs. Is that very first selection where, you know, here on this project at the end, 96% of their materials met at least one category. Often when they start out, they might be at 50, 65, somewhere in there. In part because maybe they just haven't been able to find the information, or they are looking for recommendations on products to switch out. We've also been able to use this information with our clients as well. And then lastly, just in terms of advocacy and kind of getting out there and really talking with people, here are just some of the presentations that my director of interiors and I have done and or will be doing. If you're in Portland for the Sustainable Building Week coming up in a few weeks, I've collected some of the greatest sustainability minds in the Pacific Northwest to do a presentation about the material pledge on Monday night, October 6th, I think it is. So join us, please. And then lastly, I just want to end on this event that we did last week. We opened up all of our offices to our material reps and said, come in, learn about what we're doing with the AIA material pledge, learn about these different categories, and understand how this is going to change the way that we look at materials. That we've, when we look at materials, obviously cost, aesthetics, durability, maintainability, those things are always going to be important, but we're going beyond that now. We're looking at human and environmental health impacts, and we need you to come along with us. The feedback on this event was tremendous. It's sure something that will be at least a semi-annual, if not an annual event. So that's it for me. And I think we're ready for questions.
Great. Thank you all. And we've got about almost 10 minutes for questions, and I'm seeing a couple come in here. I'll start with one for Jennifer. What is your firm's qualification for a product meeting a category? The pledge has multiple questions baked into a category, so this is something we've been thinking about.
That's a great question. This early as a start, it is really, even if it's just transparency, that we know that transparency doesn't necessarily mean it's a great product, but at least it's that first step. So we're able to choose and encouraging our teams right now to choose products that kind of meet any basic level of any category. So if it's an HPD or an EPD, that's fine. At some point, our goal is to be able to start tracking our improvement over time, going beyond transparency to optimization. How many more products are we able to select that have actually been optimized? So right now, the idea is just, kind of that simple, at a simple level, how does it meet any one of the categories?
All right, I'm going to jump to Christine. You had a couple of questions come in. Somebody really liked the action plan table. How do you typically articulate these requirements into legally binding contract clauses for general contractors to comply with?
Awesome question. Not impossible, but it's an awesome and complicated question. First of all, that's why I think it's the relevance of facing this as a whole thing. The materials like table by its own is nothing if you don't follow up through submittals, for example. And that's training on our people to review submittals to see if somebody's replacing something, what are they replacing with? Does it have the same characteristics, what they're proposing? That's like the most concrete way to chase this over into CA that comes into my mind. Legally binding, I would be welcoming answers, all to be honest, but I think also every day more, of course, you have your favorites regarding like manufacturers and materials, but every day more, there are a couple exceptions. They know what they mean, like when manufacturers comes visit, when they propose stuff. And I think they're the biggest guarantee that you have. They're gonna like want that their products are used correctly, that
Anyone else lose audio?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Christine, we lost you. Keep going.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying that with time, the only thing that I would say is like work with people that they want to work with you, basically. I wouldn't chase people that don't want to work with you, because there's where you find that kind of issue.
Did anybody else want to weigh into that, dealing with GCs, before I move on to the next question?
I'll just add, because we do a lot of public work, and our specification writer is really particular about, if a client's not particularly asking for this, if we are imposing this goals, how do we deal with that? And we do have to kind of walk a fine line. The idea that, if we can show a client that, why there are benefits to this and it's the same cost, that kind of thing, we're going to fight for that in our specifications. But at the end of the day, if a GC comes back with a product that meets all the client's goals and maybe not our goals, we have to have some room for that.
More general question, has limiting which products are able to be used limited creativity and variety in your project designs?
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think honestly, if anything, it almost opens it up a little bit more. I think that our designers have always had a kind of a tradition to, go and use the same products, the same materials. And once they can start to understand some of the limitations that those products bring with them in terms of meeting these requirements, it kind of opens their eyes to looking at so many different options. And I think it's actually really kind of enhanced creativity, honestly.
I think there is one exception to this because I 1000% agree with you, Jennifer, but I think there's one exception. And I've been talking lately a lot with our interior designers, and fabrics is a whole world. Fabrics
Yes,
is a
they have
complicated
a long way to
one.
come.
And every year, new one comes. And also, they're such a good friends with PFAS.
Yeah.
Like fabrics and PFAS is a whole deal. So that's the only like place that I find myself like a little more like complicated in general, but otherwise, no, no,
It,
and yeah,
just
that,
the other messages that we're giving to our designers is right. This is our goal. I mean, we want to get to a point where 100% of our materials are meeting interior health. If you've got whether it's a client standard that doesn't meet it, we can talk to them and see if we can change it out. But also, if there's just a reason that this material needs to be used and it's worth the idea of that it not meeting human health, let's have that discussion, but let's be intentional about it.
Okay. On a last question for Christine. The research value disseminating knowledge into all projects moving forward is the hardest part for us. Do you have some strategies you can share to keep this simple, but ensure that it is a resource accessible to all teams and members?
yes. Guys, this is my experience, but yes, playlists. Playlists are your biggest friend. Playlists and can take the form that you want. For us, was um, spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, because you wanted to be accessible for everyone. So it was a live document where everyone would build into their experiences. So you found a cool material and you belong to the K to 12 practice area, you would put it in there. And even more awesome because you learn and you fit into the learning curve in a sense that it was a polemic material, it was linoleum for public schools. So you would know immediately who put it there and you could contact them. How did it work? How many years has been installed? Is actually performing on its copy? You would hear like interesting stories. Actually, guys, was waxed. Oh, damn it. So that's interesting. And now that's what we're doing. We're taking those playlists to actually feed and back up the tables that I was showing you. So hopefully there are resources that fits into each other. So you don't leave people just with their requests in there. If we're requesting something from them, hopefully they can go into this digital library or playlist into these platforms that I was telling you, and they can look in there and see what can I pull from here that was already researched, right? There's so many hours into research.
I'll just add to that. One of the things I'm excited that we're doing moving forward is taking all that product data that we found, entering it into our manufacturer database so that with each manufacturer, we can see what products we've specified, how they kind of stand up in terms of how many pledge categories they meet. And then also that's going to give us kind of the roadmap to move forward to actually provide feedback on those products. If there is an issue, we can either make note of it, take it out, whatever, recommend to not use it because it was an issue in this case. So just the more we have data, the more information will be available for our teams.
Love that as a closing thought. And we're just about coming in on time. So just wanted to give you guys any chance for last thoughts. And thank you all for joining us in this last hour. Misha, any final cheerleading you want to do?
Well, I just think, it's incredible to see how both your firms have taken the framework that the materials plan has offered and the impact categories and really defined what that means to implement in your work. And I find it very inspiring. And I think it's a great example as we were able to collect more and more of this data as a collective. Imagine the impact we can have when we find that toilet partitions are the category that doesn't have anything. Like we will change the toilet partition manufacturing landscape because they will see,
Coming
oh
for
my
you.
God, not on this bandwagon. And there's, we probably could be. And I think that's what's really important is making this part of your conversations, in whatever scale you work at, is going to move the needle. And I think that's the really exciting thing about us doing this collectively and having this framework that we can all work from. So.
And sharing what works and
Yeah,
where the
I
challenges
agree.
still are,
The most
everything.
share. Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more. That's it.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to stop recording and I hope to see you next time, and we'll follow up with some links in an email as well. Thanks again for all your time.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.